One day, I was coming home to a family I loved, and the next, I was standing in a courtroom, listening to my wife of 10 years list my supposed shortcomings as a husband and father. The lies rolled off her tongue as smoothly as honey. Avenue. She was everything I'd ever wanted when we met. Intelligent, ambitious, and magnetic. I never imagined she could turn that ambition into a weapon, nor that she'd point it directly at me. But here we were. The woman I once trusted with my heart had used that trust to destroy me. And the court? The court handed her the keys to my life. Let me tell you, there's nothing quite like the sound of a gavel hitting wood to drive home how powerless you are. Full custody of Sophia went to Ava, as if I was some weekend tourist in my own daughter's life. The judge decided I'd become a walking wallet. Spousal support, child support, and an endless parade of legal fees. I could see the sympathy in the judge's eyes, but sympathy doesn't pay bills. I tried to catch Sophia's eye as she sat quietly in the back, clutching her stuffed bear. She looked confused, maybe a little scared, and who could blame her? She didn't understand why her dad wouldn't be coming home with her. I wanted to run to her, to tell her it would be okay, but the bailiff standing near the door reminded me that wasn't my right anymore. As Ava walked past me on her way out, she leaned in close enough for only me to hear. "You should have known better, Stephen," she said, her voice low and smug. I didn't reply. I didn't even flinch. Let her think she'd won. She didn't see what was happening behind my silence. That's the funny thing about people like Ava. They mistake quiet for weakness. But I'd built my career on turning disasters into opportunities, and this was no different. I left the courtroom that day with nothing but my name and a fire in my gut. I'd lost the battle, sure, but the war? Oh, that was just getting started. Ava thought she could betray me, manipulate the system, and come out unscathed. She thought wrong. And as for Sophia, she didn't belong to the courts or to Ava's twisted games. She was my daughter, and I'd get her back, no matter what it took. I'll admit, the first few weeks after the court's ruling were rough. I kept running the numbers, trying to figure out how to pay for 2 lives, mine and Ava's. The spousal support alone felt like a slap in the face. Ava didn't just take Sophia, she wanted to wring every last cent out of me like I owed her for her betrayal. But I'm not the kind of man who wallows. No, I adapt. So, if the court said I had to pay, I'd pay. Just in my own way. The first payment was due on a Monday. I spent Sunday night at the bank, withdrawing the exact amount of spousal support, $4,350 in coins. Quarters, nickels, and dimes, all packed into neat little rolls. I imagined Ava's face when the delivery guy dropped off the 2 massive sacks at her front door. I almost laughed when her lawyer called me the next day. "Mr. Price, are you serious about this?" he asked, sounding equal parts annoyed and bewildered. "Dead serious," I replied, my tone as neutral as a monk's. The court order didn't specify how the payment should be made, just that it needed to be made. The lawyer huffed and threatened to report me for contempt, but I knew the rules. I'd paid, on time, fully. If Ava wanted to lug a mountain of coins to her bank, that was her problem, not mine. I got creative after that. One month I sent her the money in prepaid gift cards. Another time, I paid entirely in $2 bills. My favorite, though, was the check I had printed on a custom card featuring a smiling photo of me and Sophia. Ava couldn't tear that check apart fast enough, but she still had to cash it. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about sending a message. I wanted Ava to know I wasn't broken, that I wasn't going to let her win this war of hers. If she wanted to bleed me dry, she'd have to work for it. Each time, I imagined her fury. The slammed doors, the complaints to her lawyer, the quiet seething when she realized she couldn't do a damn thing about it. It was my small way of taking back control, of reminding her that while she might have the court's favor, she didn't own me. Sophia called me one night, her little voice hesitant. "Daddy, Mommy was mad today. She said you were being mean. I forced a chuckle, though my chest tightened. Sometimes grown-ups don't get along, sweetheart, I said. But don't you worry. Daddy's just making sure things are fair. I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time that night. Sophia didn't deserve any of this. But Ava? She'd made her bed, and I wasn't done tucking her into it yet. The contempt of court order hit me like a brick to the face. I knew my payments, though legal, were pushing boundaries. But when the cops showed up at my office one Thursday afternoon, cuffs in hand, I realized I'd underestimated just how much Ava wanted me crushed. Jail isn't what you see on TV. It's quieter, almost eerily so, like the calm before a storm. I was given a cell barely big enough to stretch out in, and a roommate who barely spoke, a hulking guy named Joe who seemed to have his own set of rules for survival. But I wasn't there to make friends. At first, I was angry, furious, not just at Ava, but at the whole damn system. I'd done everything right, made every payment, showed up to every court date, and still, here I was, locked away like some common criminal. The bitterness threatened to swallow me whole. But then I remembered something my father once said. Life only beats you if you stand still. So, I moved. I kept my head down, watching and learning. Jail is its own kind of business, and I've always been good at reading people. It didn't take long before I ran into Ryan, a ghost from my past. Back in college, Ryan and I had built a small tech startup before life took us in different directions. He'd landed here after some bad financial decisions spiraled out of control. Seeing him again was like finding a lifeline in a sea of chaos. Ryan was sharp, still carrying that spark of ingenuity we'd shared years ago. Over late-night conversations and whispered strategy sessions, we began to plot. Not just my survival, but something bigger. My revenge. Ava thought she'd buried me, but all she'd done was force me underground, where the soil was fertile for ideas. We started small, piecing together a network of information. Ryan had a knack for finding out who owed who and what strings could be pulled. I fed him details about Ava, her habits, her connections, her weaknesses. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form. When I wasn't working with Ryan, I spent my time planning quietly. I thought about Sophia, her laugh, her curious questions about the world, the way she used to curl up beside me during movie nights. She was my anchor, my reason for enduring. The days stretched into weeks, but I adjusted. I learned how to navigate the unwritten rules of the place, how to barter, how to listen. By the time my release date rolled around, I wasn't the same man who had walked in. As I stepped back into the sunlight, the world felt different. Ava might have won this round, but she'd given me something invaluable. Time to think. Time to plan. And if there's one thing I've always been good at, it's making a comeback. Ava had built a house of cards, and I was ready to bring it down. Freedom tastes different when you've been caged. Walking out of that jail, I could feel the sun on my skin, the air in my lungs, but the weight of Ava's betrayal still pressed heavy on my chest. I didn't just want justice anymore. I wanted revenge. Not the messy, impulsive kind. No, I wanted revenge served cold, calculated and devastating. Ava had turned my life into a battlefield, and I had no intention of leaving it scorched without taking her empire down with me. The first call I made was to Caleb, my brother. He's the kind of man who knows how to move in the shadows, a fixer with connections that stretched into places even I couldn't reach. Caleb didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. "Tell me what you need," he said, and just like that, the gears of my plan began to turn. The next call was to Mason, my business associate and one of the few people I still trusted. Mason had always been good with details, the kind of guy who could make a missing paper trail reappear with a few well-placed phone calls. "We're going to build a case," I told him, my voice steady. "Not just against Ava, but everyone who played a part in this circus. Ava thought she was untouchable, but everyone has secrets, And secrets, when uncovered, can turn the tide of any battle. Caleb started with Ava's inner circle, the friends who laughed a little too hard at my expense, the lawyers who twisted the truth into knots, the judge who seemed unnervingly biased in her favor. Mason focused on the numbers. He dug into her finances, her purchases, her connections. The deeper we went, the dirtier it got. Ava wasn't just greedy, she was reckless. Lavish trips, questionable transactions, and a history of bending the rules to her advantage. All of it began to emerge like skeletons clawing their way out of her closet. Meanwhile, I stayed in the background, playing the role of the defeated ex-husband. It wasn't hard. Ava had made sure the world saw me as a man brought to his knees. But I knew the value of patience. Every piece of information Caleb and Mason uncovered was another arrow in my quiver. Sophia became my quiet ally in all of this, though she didn't know it. During our brief visits, she'd talk about Ava, her parties, her friends, the strangers who came and went from their house. Innocent observations from a child's perspective, but to me, they were puzzle pieces falling into place. I didn't want to use Sophia, but she deserved to know the truth one day. For now, though, I kept my focus. Ava had built her kingdom on lies, manipulation, and greed. It was time to watch it crumble. Sophia's eyes were the only piece of stability in the chaos. Every time I saw her, I held on to those big, brown, curious eyes. They hadn't dimmed yet, hadn't lost the spark of innocence, though I could see the cracks forming. She wasn't happy, not really. And it killed me to watch her put on a brave face like she didn't feel the tension tugging her world apart. She started coming to me with questions, little ones at first. Why don't you and Mom talk anymore? Why don't you come to my school plays? Questions I couldn't answer without making Ava the villain in her mind, something I wasn't ready to do. But then her questions turned into comments, observations that stung like paper cuts. Mom's always out with her friends. That man, Uncle Peter, he's staying over a lot now. Sophia didn't say it outright, but I could hear the unease behind her words. Ava was so wrapped up in her new life that she'd stopped paying attention to the one person who mattered most. Our daughter. One day, Sophia called me out of the blue. It wasn't our usual time to talk, and her voice was shaky, almost apologetic. "Daddy," she said, "I want to come home." I stopped breathing for a second. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I don't like it here," she whispered. "Mom's always busy and she doesn't listen. I don't like her friends, and I miss you." I sat down hard, gripping the phone like it might disappear. "Sophia," I said carefully, "you know I'd take you back in a heartbeat, but the court—" "I don't care about the court," she burst out. "I want to be with you." It took everything in me not to let the floodgates open right there. I told her we'd figure it out, that she'd always have a place with me. And that's when I knew things were shifting, finally. Sophia wasn't just my daughter. She was sharp, like me. She started pulling away from Ava, spending less time at home and more time with her friends, her grandparents, anyone who wasn't part of Ava's glossy, superficial world. By the time she turned 16, she'd had enough. She went to the courts herself, filing for emancipation with the determination of someone twice her age. The judge granted her request, much to Ava's outrage. I remember the look on Ava's face as Sophia packed her bags and moved back into the house we'd shared when we were still a family. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a start. Having Sophia back under my roof was like breathing again. She wasn't just my daughter. She was my compass, reminding me what all of this was for. We started rebuilding together, her confidence, my stability, our bond. Ava thought she could take everything from me, but she'd forgotten one thing. Blood runs thicker than manipulation. It started with whispers, faint cracks in the carefully polished facade Ava had built. People began to notice things. Missing deadlines, sloppy work, little details that hinted at a woman losing her grip. At first, it was subtle. But like a dam under too much pressure, Ava's world began to break apart piece by piece. The first major blow came at her job. I'd stayed quiet during the initial stages of my revenge, letting my team gather the evidence like vultures circling a dying beast. Mason had outdone himself. Emails, shady financial deals, and questionable use of company funds, enough to make Ava's employer sit up and take notice. I wasn't there when she was called into the boardroom, but I imagined the scene. Ava, confident and composed, walking in with that smug air of invincibility, only to be blindsided by the stack of evidence laid out before her. By the time she left, her position was gone, her reputation in tatters. It didn't stop there. Caleb's network had worked its magic, and soon, Ava's personal life became public fodder. Photos of her extravagant trips funded by borrowed money, her dalliances with men who weren't her husband, and of course, the real gem, her blatant manipulation of the legal system to frame me. The court of public opinion is brutal, and Ava learned that the hard way. Her friends, those shallow, fair-weather companions who once rallied behind her, turned on her with the kind of speed that only fear of association can inspire. Invitations dried up. Parties were held without her. Even the parents at Sophia's old school avoided her, whispering behind their hands whenever she walked by. I'd like to say I felt sorry for her, but that would be a lie. Ava had built her kingdom on lies, manipulation, and greed, and now she was reaping the rewards of her labor. By the time she lost the house, it almost felt anticlimactic. The lavish home she'd fought so hard to keep during the divorce went on the market, the bank foreclosing after she couldn't keep up with the payments. I knew the irony wasn't lost on her. Living beyond her means while draining me of mine had finally caught up with her. Sophia, to her credit, didn't gloat. She could have thrown it in Ava's face, but instead, she maintained a quiet dignity that made me prouder than ever. "She's still my mom," she said once, her voice soft but firm. But she made her choices. And Ava's choices had left her with nothing. By the time the dust settled, she was renting a small apartment on the outskirts of town, living off what little savings she had left. Her name, once associated with success and power, became a cautionary tale whispered at networking events and cocktail parties. I didn't have to lift a finger to finish her. She'd done it all herself. Revenge doesn't always come with fireworks and grand finales. Sometimes it's watching the pieces fall exactly where they're meant to, knowing you set the stage. Ava had played her game, and now she was just another pawn swept off the board. The day the court revisited my case, I walked into that courtroom a changed man. Gone was the defeated husband who had stumbled out of the system's grip months before. I had done my time, learned my lessons, and armed myself with the truth. This time, I was ready. The judge presiding over my original case, the one Ava had seemingly charmed into submission, was no longer on the bench. Whispers of misconduct and questionable rulings had caught up with him, and he was quietly removed from his position. Poetic justice, if ever there was any. A new judge, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, took the reins. I knew I had a chance to set things right. My attorney, bolstered by the evidence Mason and Caleb had collected, presented a case so airtight even Ava's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the nearest bench. It was all there in black and white. Ava's manipulations, her misuse of funds, the falsified statements that had painted me as an unfit father and husband. As each piece of evidence was laid out, I stole glances at Ava. Her face was pale, her confident demeanor crumbling with every damning word. But it wasn't just about tearing her down. It was about clearing my name. I needed the court and Sophia to see me for who I really was, not the caricature Ava had created. When the ruling came, it was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The financial obligations that had once strangled me were slashed significantly, and the spousal support was eliminated altogether. The court even acknowledged the harm caused by Ava's deceit, though it stopped short of punitive measures. More importantly, the custody arrangement was revisited. While Sophia was already living with me, the court's official recognition of her decision was a victory in itself. Ava's protests fell on deaf ears. The system that had once been her weapon was now working against her. As I walked out of the courtroom, I caught Ava's eye. For the first time in years, she looked small, powerless. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The gavel had spoken, and this time, it spoke the truth. The days that followed were surreal. Friends and colleagues who had distanced themselves during the chaos started reaching out, offering congratulations and apologies. Even strangers, those who had followed the public unraveling of my life, sent messages of support. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom or the headlines. It was at home, sitting across from Sophia at the dinner table, hearing her laugh again, seeing her smile without hesitation. It was knowing that the storm had passed and that, for the first time in years, the future looked bright. Ava might have started this war, but I had finished it. And now, I could finally move on. Rebuilding your life after it's been torn to shreds isn't easy, but there's something liberating about starting from scratch. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of Ava's schemes crushing my chest. I wasn't just living for survival anymore. I was living for myself, and for Sophia. Having Sophia back under my roof brought life back into the house. The quiet dinners that used to feel like penance were now filled with laughter and stories about her school, her friends, her plans for the future. She was thriving, and watching her rebuild herself made me want to do the same. That's where Olivia came in. I'd known Olivia since we were kids. She was the quiet girl with the loud laugh who used to run barefoot across the fields behind our school. We'd lost touch over the years, but when Sophia started seeing her for counseling during the worst of the custody battle, our paths crossed again. At first, it was just small talk, updates about Sophia, polite exchanges during pickups and drop-offs. But there was something in Olivia's voice, in the way she looked at me, that felt different. She didn't see me as the broken man Ava had tried to make me. She saw me. Olivia became more than just a counselor for Sophia. She became a friend to both of us. She helped Sophia navigate her emotions and reminded me that it was okay to let someone else in. Slowly, cautiously, we began spending more time together. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into walks. Walks turned into late-night talks that stretched into the early hours of the morning. She didn't push, and I didn't rush. After everything I'd been through, trust wasn't something I gave easily. But Olivia had a way of grounding me, of making the chaos in my head feel manageable. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sophia came outside with a smirk on her face. "So, are you two a thing now, or what?" she asked, crossing her arms with the confidence only a teenager can muster. Olivia and I exchanged a glance, both of us laughing despite ourselves. "You're a little too nosy for your own good," I told her. But the truth was written all over our faces. It wasn't long before Olivia became a fixture in our lives. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was just there, steady and supportive, offering her quiet strength when we needed it most. Together, we started to build something new. The old wounds didn't disappear, but they stopped defining us. The house, once filled with ghosts of a broken past, became a home again, a place of warmth, laughter, and hope. Ava's shadow still lingered, but it didn't loom as large as it once had. She had remarried, a wealthy lawyer, of course, and by all accounts was trying to piece together a life defined by appearances. But there was a hollowness to it, a kind of superficial sheen that couldn't hide the cracks underneath. I didn't wish her ill. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. And as I sat on that porch, Olivia by my side and Sophia planning her next adventure, I knew one thing for certain. My life wasn't defined by the pain Ava caused. It was defined by the love I'd found in its aftermath. If life has taught me anything, it's that the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it's buried. Watching Ava's world collapse wasn't just satisfying, it was enlightening. She had built her life on lies, manipulation, and greed, and now she was paying the price for every choice she had made. But Ava wasn't the only one who faced justice. The ripples of her downfall spread far and wide, pulling in everyone who had played a part in the circus she orchestrated. The corrupt judge who ruled against me was disbarred after an investigation uncovered a pattern of unethical behavior. Turns out, Ava wasn't the only person he'd handed biased rulings to. The legal community, once quick to dismiss my claims, now scrambled to distance themselves from the mess he'd left behind. Then there were the lawyers. Ava's attorney, who had twisted the truth into an art form, faced scrutiny for his role in falsifying evidence. I didn't have to lift a finger. The evidence Mason and Caleb uncovered did all the work. He lost his license, his reputation, and eventually his firm. Even some of Ava's so-called friends weren't spared. Those who had benefited from her schemes, whether through shady business deals or backdoor favors, found themselves exposed. Their reputations crumbled, their social circles shrinking as they became liabilities rather than assets. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about balance, about showing the world that actions have consequences. Ava and her allies had spent years bending the rules to their advantage, but now the rules were bending back. The fallout wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, methodical, and absolute. Careers ended. Friendships dissolved. Lives were changed, not by me, but by the weight of their own choices. I made it a point to stay out of the spotlight. This wasn't about gloating or public vindication. It was about reclaiming my life and protecting Sophia's future. Watching justice unfold was enough.